Naomi. So my name is, I am Director of Customer Success for Objective Ed and appreciate you letting me join in on your meeting today and share with you a little bit about BuddyBooks. Super informal, especially since this is a small group, so I do want you to ask questions as we go along. BuddyBooks is funded through the National Science Foundation. We actually sent out an email this morning that we were awarded our Phase 2 grant to continue the work that we started with BuddyBooks, which is super exciting. Just means that the National Science Foundation saw a lot of benefit to what we had already built, and it's helping us to continue to build out our tool as well. You see at the bottom there, our tagline, from intervention to independence, supporting students every step of the way. That really is what Objective Ed is all about as a company. So before I switch here, I typically will ask a lot of people, especially when I'm doing a live demo, if there were one thing that you could have your students do to improve their reading outside of something like a structured literacy program, what would that be? And so I'll tell you what I get most of the time via those answers, just because we're in a little bit larger of a group here. The number one answer that I hear to that question is read. If we could get kids to read more, we know that they would improve. And there's a lot of research and science behind the direct correlation between reading and academic performance. Yet we know that most students read less than 15 minutes per day. And this graphic that you see on the screen is actually all students, not just our struggling readers. So if you were to break out and look at kiddos that have dyslexia or are identified with other learning disabilities related to reading, the numbers would be even worse. Lots of factors go into this, and this graphic is actually starting to be a little bit older now. I would suspect with the technology availability that we have these days that even fewer students are spending 15 minutes per day reading. We also know that fewer than 1 in 5 students reads an average of 30 or more minutes per day. So a little bit of background on me. I am a former teacher, Texas-based, if you can't tell from my accent. I know we have one Texas person here, Jade, from Region 4 Service Center. In Texas, we have something called educational diagnosticians. Not a lot of states have those. It's somewhat similar to a school psychologist, a little bit different background in training. So I was an educational diagnostician for a number of years, and then a district level special education administrator before moving over into the educational technology space. I tell you all of that to just say I understand the difficulties that our kiddos these days have. More important than all of that, though, I happen to have a 15-year-old son at home with dyslexia. So this was Reed. He was identified with dyslexia very early in 2nd grade, went completely through an Orton-Gillingham-based structured literacy program and graduated by the end of his 5th grade year. And I did the air quotes for graduated because we all know if you have dyslexia, you have it indefinitely. You just learn coping mechanisms. And Reed did a really, really good job with his structured literacy program. But like most students with dyslexia, he still needs lots and lots of practice on a regular basis to keep those skills up and to continue to use new skills. Well, Reed was using a whole lot of audiobooks, a huge audiobook fan in our house, until we realized there's a problem with just using simple traditional audiobooks. So Reed finally got to the age that he was reading books that were legitimately of interest to me. And so what would happen is he would be listening to a book. I would get the physical copy and read whatever he was reading. And that way we could engage in conversation about the literature. Well, this book that you see on the screen here, Tuesdays at the Castle, is a book he was reading a while back. And if you're not familiar with this series, it's a great series for upper elementary, lower middle school. It starts at Tuesdays at the Castle, and it goes all the way to Saturdays at Sea. Well, in this book, the castle is living. Well, at the end of the first book, the castle actually dies, but it almost immediately comes back to life. Well, Reed came to me and he said, "Dad, the castle died. How are they going to make an entire series out of this book?" He had completely missed the fact that the castle had already come back to life. And it's not because he has comprehension issues. His comprehension is actually quite strong. The issue is he wasn't actively engaged as he was listening to the audiobook. And the particular audiobook tool that he was using is one of those that would highlight words as he went along. And I would constantly ask him, "Are you reading? Are you following along with those words?" And what did he always say? Yes. But obviously he wasn't. He missed a critical piece of the story. So out of this need for engagement, BuddyBooks was born. So what exactly is BuddyBooks? BuddyBooks is simply a student reading interactively with a computer partner, much like they would with a parent or a teacher. But when they read out loud with the computer, they go back and forth, and you'll see this in just a moment. We can set it where they can read a sentence at a time or a paragraph at a time, or they can even just repeat back what the computer said because we duplicate the sentences in one of our options. But as they are doing their portion out loud, we are capturing their voice and using AI. So we can tell you how long the student read, how well the student read, all the way down to the phoneme level. We can give you lots of information that you don't get from a traditional audiobook. Audiobooks, if they collect any data at all, are typically telling you how long the book was open or was playing, maybe how many pages were turned, but that's really about it. So I always tell folks, we are an alternative, a better, in my opinion, alternative to simple audiobooks. We are a simple tool to a complex problem. The complex problem is kids need to read more. And there are lots of literacy tools that are out there that do a lot of good things as far as instruction. What we're focusing on is simply the practice side of things. So what I want to do now is switch over and actually log in and show you what the student side looks like. And then I'll show you the data that we collect as well. So let me get logged in. This program is completely web-based, desktop, laptop, Chromebook. You can use it on your iPad or your iPhone. You don't even have to have a special app. You actually just use the web browser on those devices. We are not currently compatible with Android devices. I am hopeful that with this phase 2 NSF grant that I just mentioned, that we'll build out the Android capability as well. Okay, so I'm going to click Start Reading. When I do this, what's going to happen immediately is the computer is going to read first, and then it will say that it is my turn to read, and then we'll just go back and forth a couple times so you can see that.
They really are, said the lion, but that doesn't make me any braver, and as long as I know myself to be a coward, I shall be unhappy.
It switches and says, your turn. So once more, the little company set off upon the journey, the lion walking with stately strides at Dorothy's side. Now, if I need one-to-one correspondence, I can actually track with my mouse and it highlights the words. When I'm done, I hit return or enter on my keyboard.
Toto did not approve of this new comrade at first, for he could not forget how nearly he had been crushed between the lion's great jaws.
And it just continues back and forth. Now, there are some settings that students individually can change. So from an accessibility standpoint, they can change background color, font color, highlight color, adjust the font size. You can actually change the text highlighting. I have mine, hopefully you noticed, is highlighting the words as it reads. You can set that to highlight sentences at a time. That's really appropriate for your older kiddos that may not need the word by word highlighting any longer. You can adjust the speaking speed. You can speed it up. You can slow it down. Follow along is the feature where I could track with my mouse for the one-to-one correspondence. Now, one question I frequently get is, can you change the voice? Right now, because we're doing a lot of research and efficacy studies, we are sticking with one voice. The voice that you heard is a Microsoft AI voice. There are tons of Microsoft AI voices that are out there. Originally, when we first released, there were several that the kids could choose from. Our research team came back and said, you know what, while we're looking at data, let's narrow it down to just one voice so that we're comparing apples to apples. I anticipate at some point in the near future that we will offer voices back. All right, so let's talk briefly about content, and then I'll come back and show you a little bit more. We formally partner with Bookshare. So we have, if you're not familiar with Bookshare, they're funded out of the U.S. Department of Education. They provide 1 million+ books for students with print disabilities. So we partner with them for our source of content, which means there are 1 million+ books that are available to read through BuddyBooks. The only books that we do not support are graphic novels or comic books, and that's because we do not import pictures, which is also by design, because we know that pictures for kiddos that are struggling readers, especially those that are really working on decoding, sometimes having the pictures can be detrimental to the practice that they do in that area. I know that's a little bit of a controversial statement. There is a body of research behind that. You're either one school of thought or the other. Some people think that the pictures are absolutely critical. We have chosen to go the route where we don't have pictures in the system. Okay, now I'm going to exit out of the settings. Oh, Naomi just said there's a Bookshare webinar tomorrow that they're doing. So if you're not familiar with Bookshare, please attend that. They are a great resource and they are 100% free for qualifying students. So shout out to Bookshare for sure.
Toto did not approve of this new comrade.
Now, if the student comes to a word that they don't know, whether it's the computer's turn or their turn, they can actually hit the question mark button here, double click on the word, and it's going to do two things. It will allow it to be pronounced.
Comrade.
And then there's also a little short definition of the word as well. So instead of just getting stuck on a word or skipping the word, they can use the system to help them understand what the word was. When I exit out of this, and I appreciate this about the system, I used to teach third grade years ago, and I was so bad about helping kids with words, and we would just get it as they came to it and continue on, right? We just fixed it and moved on. I never made them go back and get it in context. You know, they say hindsight's 2020. Looking back on my teaching practices, there's so many things I could have done so much better. Well, one thing I appreciate about BuddyBooks is that when I exit out of the help, it will actually take the student to the back of that section so that they have to experience the word in context again.
Toto did not approve of this new comrade at first, for he could not forget.
Okay. So the other thing that I want to point out here is there is a timer at the top right. Right now it's grayed out, maybe a little bit hard to see. It's at 9 minutes, 18 seconds. This particular student has a target read time of 10 minutes per day. As the student logs in and reads, that counter counts down. It does count down across multiple sessions. So if the kid logs in and reads 5 minutes and then logs in later and reads 5 minutes, it will continue to count for the day. When that hits 0, it actually changes to a green check mark and it drops confetti on the screen just as a positive reinforcer for the student that they've hit their target read time for the day. When we first developed BuddyBooks, we initially thought kids would read right up to the point where they hit their target read time and then stop, right? Do the minimum amount that their teacher's requiring them. What we are finding in the data, and this is not every kid, but a lot of kids, they are reading beyond their target read time. They get that confetti and they keep going because they're actively engaged in the story, right? It's just like when we read and it's like, okay, I'm going to do one more chapter. They're also reading books that are of high interest to them, not just at their reading level, but more at their interest level. We find kids using BuddyBooks, reading books that are harder than what you would expect because they're almost sharing a little bit of the cognitive load with the computer, right? The computer reads, the kid reads, they get a brain break while the computer reads, and they should be following along with the words, but it's not the same as having to decode every single word as they go along. Okay, I want to pause here for just a second and open up for any questions on the student side before I show you the data that we collect on the teacher side. Any questions from anyone? You can either unmute and ask or dump them into the chat if you would like. Okay, I'm not hearing any. It's so hard to give adults appropriate wait time. All right, let's keep going. So what I want to show you next is this teacher dashboard. Now, what happens, this is your roster of all of the students that you're serving. And I am going to click through, let's just look at Hannah. Hannah is a real student. I do have permission to share her data. She is an 8th grader identified with dyslexia. Now, the first thing that I'll show here on her dashboard is her daily reading time. I can see that she read for 20 minutes yesterday. If I click through here, it will actually open up and show me how much time she has read across multiple days. She read for 1.2 hours on the 5th of March, and she cannot fake that time. So what happens when it's the student's turn to read, if they don't read out loud, because we're listening, it pops up and it says, I can't hear you. And so they have to continue, otherwise it pauses in the book. Okay, so we had a comment come in. Kim says, I can see where kids would be reluctant to do this during class. Do most use this at home? And is student data privacy covered over Bookshare, or do you sign contracts through BuddyBooks? Okay, so let's address each of those. We see it used in multiple settings. Ideally, we would like to see kids using it at home primarily. That's an issue, right? Getting kids to do anything at home. So I don't know that we have tons of home usage. We do have quite a bit of in-school usage, though. And surprisingly, we have probably more middle school usage than we do just about anywhere. While kids often are reluctant to read out loud with an adult when it's a computer and it's an inanimate object and others in the classroom are doing it, we find that there's not really a huge barrier in doing that. Now, there are lots of different ways to accomplish that. For younger grade levels, a lot of times we will see it used in center rotations. So when they go to, they have a reading center instead of just independently reading, or as we all know, sitting there staring at the book or the ceiling and not reading, they're using BuddyBooks. We've seen it used within a reading lab type setting. We've seen it used in structured literacy classrooms. Obviously, it's not replacing anything that they're doing structured literacy wise, but it may be an activity that they do at the end of their session, which tend to be smaller groups. Sometimes they use it on Fridays as part of their reward or free time. So I think there are a lot of creative ways to do it. Absolutely, there may be some kids that are reluctant to do it because it's out loud. We encourage use across multiple places. Great question. And then the other is student data privacy. So we, for districts or organizations that purchase BuddyBooks, we do have our own service agreement that has data privacy information in it. We work with lots of districts across the US. And so if there are individual data privacy concerns, we sign off on data privacy agreements all the time. If there's anything specific, Kim, you have questioned data privacy wise, I'm happy to talk through as much of that as I can. But typically not an issue for us to meet all the data privacy requirements. Matter of fact, our system on our side requires very little personally identifiable information. We ask for name. You can actually use first initial, last initial, don't even have to do full name. We recently started asking for grade level. We don't have to have date of birth or anything else. Okay, so let's look at more data. So for Hannah, as I scroll down, I can see how far along she is on the book. There is a section on phonemes. For the sake of time today, I'm not going to go into each of these individually. I'll talk a little bit about it. I can click through and it gives me sample passages that contain these phonemes where the student struggled, and you can play back and listen to some of the sentences. I prefer to spend our time showing you some of the playback from another location, but I'll show you how that works. There is a total accuracy. So when Hannah read, actually yesterday, she read with 89% accuracy. We also track correct words per minute. So the last time she read, yesterday again, she was reading at 154 correct words per minute. Think about your secondary teachers who struggle with knowing how to calculate words correct per minute. Your elementary folks often, they can do it in their sleep. But when we get to middle school and high school, so often those folks aren't trained to collect this type of data. So the system is doing it for them. And for a lot of the younger ones, it frees the teachers up from having to do all this data collection, and they can focus more on direct reading instruction. Now, at the bottom here, there are a lot of passages. So we do something called review mode, and I'm going to come back and actually look at the data for all of this in just a second. But before I do that, let me show you how review mode works. So while we know just practicing reading by itself would be tremendously powerful, when you add in a component where students do some self-correction, it just adds to the power of what the system does. So we have something called review mode, and it's really the only direct instructional piece that we do. And we deliberately limit this because we want kids to enjoy using BuddyBooks and enjoy the reading process. But at the beginning of each of their reading sessions, or each day that they start reading, we look back at their prior reading passages, and we find one section or one passage that they struggled with. And we present it back to them, and we do three things. So the first thing we do is we model read it for them, read it back to them, modeling how it should be read, but the words that they struggled with are bolded. Now in the video, you're going to see in just a second, the words are color-coded yellow and red. We have since changed that based on feedback. So instead of the color coding, it's simply bolded on the student's side. Then we play back for the student what they read. They actually hear themselves reading and the mistakes that they made so that they have an opportunity to hear how they sound. And then finally, they get the opportunity to go back and read that passage again and self-correct. So here is a video of a student using review mode. Give that just a second to load. Kind of watch his eyes as we go through. It's a little fleeting, but you'll see how he's tracking, and it's him experiencing the entire process for review mode.
Let's review a few passages from your last session. I'll read it first. Lilith mounted his horse, and so did the soldiers who were guarding the party. The tax collectors hurried to get inside the coach. Seeley supposed this arrangement was better for everyone. The girls would help keep Lorcan under control, and the tax collectors wouldn't have to share the coach with 4 dogs. Now let's hear what you read.
Lulath motioned his horse, and so did the soldiers who were guarding the party. Tax collectors hurried to get inside the coach. Seeley supposed his argument was better for everyone. The girls would help keep Lorcan under control. The tax collectors wouldn't have to share the coach with 4 dogs.
Click on the ear symbol to listen again. When you're ready, click on the record button and try reading the passage again.
Lulath mounted his horse, and so did the soldiers who were guarding the party. The tax collectors hurried to get inside the coach. Seeley supposed this arrangement was better for everyone. The girls would help keep Lorcan under control, and the tax collectors wouldn't have to share the coach with 4 dogs.
Great job. Now let's get back to the book.
And then the kiddo just picks up with where they were reading for the day and continues on. Okay, so while they do that, we actually collect data. So you'll see, let me go back to the top here. The passage is listed, the date of the first attempt and their score, date of the second attempt and their score. And as we scroll down, typically you'll see a pretty big improvement between the two. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a few points. Occasionally it may be they do worse the second time. But the nice thing about the system is you can actually go in and listen to what they did so that you can, from your perspective, subjectively grade what they've done. So let's just do one of these. Here's a fairly short one. So I'm going to click through. All right, so Hannah read this passage. On the teacher side, it is still color-coded. I can hover over the word and it gives me a breakdown of how the computer scored it phonemically. Let's listen to her first attempt.
In each hand he held up one half of a great horn, cloven through the middle, a wild ox horn beyond with silver.
Okay, now keep in mind, she didn't do terribly there, right? She said though, and she said beyond instead of bound. There's been no direct intervention by a parent or a teacher. She simply went through our review mode. This was her second opportunity.
In each hand he held up one half of a great horn, cloven through the middle, a wild ox horn bound with silver.
So what we are seeing is when kids go through review mode, we're seeing increases in accuracy. We're seeing increases in fluency, which we expected. What we're also seeing, though, that we didn't necessarily expect was changes in prosody. It makes sense if you think about it. They just listened to themselves read a passage. If they sounded terrible, they want to sound better. And so and there are several other things that go into that. They're not having to work so hard on decoding because they just heard the words. It was modeled for them. So we are seeing changes across those 3 areas. Okay, now let's look at, almost done here. Let's look at some real data. So this is Hannah again, and this is not a very pretty chart. The data in the system generates a nice PDF that you can look at. I went in and overlaid some colors and things on this to make it easier to show in a presentation like this. So when Hannah started using BuddyBooks about 18 months ago, she was reading a book series called In Grandma's Attic. She read all the books in the series. She got to the last book, and the last time she read, she was reading about 144 correct words per minute. Well, Hannah came to me and she said, Mr. Jason, I want to try something harder. I want to try the Lord of the Rings books. I thought, oh no, don't let it show in my face, right? I didn't think she would be able to do it. These are very, very difficult books, and she was reading a fourth grade level book. I thought, you know what, let's just see how it will work in the system. So she had been reading in paragraph mode. So what I did is I turned on the Fellowship of the Ring in paragraph mode. And y'all look what happened. The first time she read, she dropped from 144 correct words per minute all the way down to 88 correct words per minute. Not to be unexpected, it's a much, much more difficult book. She went along for a couple of days and she read at the same level. She came back to me because she knows how the system works. And she said, you know what, Mr. Jason, you're right. This book was way harder than I thought it was going to be. Can we put it in sentence mode? So I flipped it. And now instead of getting big chunks of text, she got a sentence at a time. And look what happened. Over the course of time, she gradually worked her way back up. Y'all literally gives me goosebumps to talk about every time I talk about this. She has finished the entire Lord of the Rings series. She took a little break and went and read some fun little books, and then she came back and she's now currently reading The Hobbit, which is like the prequel to the Lord of the Rings series. These books, I still think, are way too hard for her, but she's able to do it because one, she's motivated and wants to do it. There are books she wants to read. She's reading back and forth with the computer. And even if she struggles when it's her turn to read, she's still getting meaning from the book because she got the sentence that was in front of it and the sentence that was behind it read to her. And so it's just an opportunity for her to read something that's of much higher interest for her. Okay, that is it in a nutshell. I'm watching the clock. We've got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to stop talking, open up for any questions or comments that you may have. I would love just feedback on what you think as well. You can unmute. You can put your questions in chat. Any questions for me? Kim asked if I mentioned cost. I did not. And then there was a second question, so let me do both. The first one was, did we mention cost? I did not. The way that our pricing works, we have two models. You can actually purchase directly on our website. So we sell a lot to homeschool parents and private tutors. Those individual seat licenses cost a little bit more. The way the pricing works, it's $19.99 a month or $199 a year. For organization-based pricing, so schools, institutions, the way that our pricing there works, it is a $1,500 minimum. That includes all setup, training, and your first 10 kids. After that, it varies based on the number of kids that you use it with, and it slides down depending on how many kids you've got, from about $100 a kid all the way down to $40 per student if you've got quite a few. A lot of folks will often ask, well, why is there a charge if Bookshare is free? The content is free through Bookshare, but we have to pay for all of the AI analysis and the back end work that happens. I also failed to mention for kids that aren't eligible for Bookshare, we do have public domain books that are available, not near as many. There are about 150 to 200 of those. We're adding to that library regularly because we know that there are a lot of kids that might not be quite Bookshare eligible that would benefit from this tool. So Jade asked, are there any plans to integrate with Learning Ally? There are not at this point in time. So any kid that is Learning Ally eligible is eligible for Bookshare. They actually have some reciprocity that's there. And I suspect your question comes from Learning Ally having human read voices. There are some technological challenges to doing the back and forth that we're doing in the AI piece with human read. Bookshare is actually beginning to add some human read books to their library as well. We don't currently integrate with those. Right now, it's the AI generated one. Hopefully, maybe at some point in the future, maybe as part of the phase 2 NSF grant that we were awarded, we can work some on integrating with the human read text as well. I've also gotten a lot of mixed feedback. Some folks love the human read. Some will come back and say, you know, it's great for entertainment, but for kids that are practicing, it's better to have the consistent voice each time. I think you could argue each way on that. That was a long way around a long way around saying, no, we don't currently integrate with Learning Ally. Okay. And then this looks like a question for you, Naomi. Is the Bookshare webinar tomorrow the same as the one Bookshare offered last week on the 21st?
I did attend the Bookshare webinar, but it's going to be on Bookshare tomorrow. So I'm pretty sure they will have the same content.
Okay. Okay, so question was, how does this connect with Bookshare? Would a student have to first sign up with Bookshare and provide eligibility, and then log in? So I didn't specifically talk about that. That's a great question. Let me actually unshare my screen, that way you can see me a little better. Okay, so the way that the integration works, it's all built in through our website. So you never have to leave BuddyBooks to get into Bookshare. What happens is the teacher actually assigns the book in BuddyBooks. And again, that's by design, because we want this to be targeted very much based on what the student's unique need is. And so when the teacher goes in to assign a book to the student, if it is a book that requires Bookshare access, a teacher plugs in credentials, and we work with all three types of Bookshare logins. So individual student, individual teacher, or organization. We work with all of those, and then it passes you through to the Bookshare site. You don't even really realize that you're pulling from Bookshare, and then allows us to get the content from them. So it really is a seamless process. If you have an organizational account and the student is not part of Bookshare yet, you actually can add the student to Bookshare from within BuddyBooks, and the teacher is able to certify the student as eligible without having to provide the proof of disability. They allow teachers to use their professional judgment to say, yes, this student is a struggling reader. And so we've worked really closely with Bookshare to streamline that, because teachers don't have time to do all of these variety of things, right? We're trying to streamline as much as we can. That was a great question, Jennifer. Thanks for asking that. All right, we're a little bit over on time. I'm good, but I want to be super respectful of yours. Are there any questions for me? Any additional questions?